Right, I'm just going to I've invited Lisa in, but holds knife like pen is her, that's Lisa Markwell, who is there you are. Right, so welcome everyone. We're going to be joined by Lisa in a minute. She's just going to accept we're connecting. If you want to know her Instagram, hi Lisa.
Hi.
Her Instagram is hold knife like pen. Now just tell me, Lisa, is this because that's the correct way you should hold a knife?
Well, it started a long time ago, actually, when I was at Leeds and I had an idea for a book, and I was talking to my agent, and we were trying to come up with ideas and try lots of things, and they were all completely rubbish. And it's an old family joke, or a sort of thing that I grew up with, people saying, "Oh, hold a knife like a pen," is a sort of terrible snobbish thing about people who held their knife in a certain way. So anyway, I was driving down the M4 and I suddenly thought, used to be a journalist, now trying to be a chef, knives, pens, and it's a sort of joke if you know it on that kind of terrible snobbishness. But anyway, even if you don't know it, it's sort of knives and pens and, journalism and
Hands
chopping
and
things
doing.
up. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's sort of, anyway, it kind of stuck, and inevitably I never finished the book. I'm sure I will one of these days. Perhaps if lockdown goes on for much longer, I'll actually get around to it.
Can
But
I
yes,
just
that's
introduce you properly because we
what
haven't
we do.
done that. So thanks everyone for joining us. And Joe Trevelli was absolutely fantastic yesterday and we adored him. But Lisa Markwell, I'm just going to give a quick resume, Lisa, of you.
Hmm.
Left school at 16, went straight into magazines, Country Life, then various fashion mags, and commissioning editor on the Sunday Times, to the Mail on Sunday Mag, editor at Harvey Nichols, was rising quite fast and furiously. This girl has got strength, I will say that. Relaunched the Independent Saturday magazine, helped launch Easy Living. We all love that magazine. Returned to the Independent at various good, strong roles to become the editor of the Independent on Sunday and won front page of the year. And then Lisa, amongst all of this, went through to speak about the adoption process, challenges facing kids with learning difficulties or special needs, underwent breast cancer. There is no stopping her because she then decided, I'm going to Leeds because I still want to work in journalism, maybe, we'll find out, or I want to learn to be a chef. But I think possibly you knew you wanted to move into food and journalism. So went to Leeds and undertook the challenging 1-year diploma course, which is full on if for anyone who's been there. And then boom, she left and became the food editor at the Sunday Times magazine and created the dish plus Code Hospitality. You edit that as well. You are on fire, Lisa.
Well, probably quite literally sometimes, without even noticing. Yeah, I mean, all of those things are true. And when you put them in a list like that, it sounds like quite a lot. But obviously, I'm extremely elderly, and it all went on over a very long period of time. It wasn't like I sort of escalated, within 5 years to reach the top at the Independent. But yeah, it's been sort of astonishing, and I feel like I was 55 a couple of weeks ago, and I had a birthday for my 45th and sort of called it Still Alive at 45. And I'm not quite, if I was allowed to have a party for 55, I don't know what I'd call it. It's sort of surviving in a new world at 55. But yeah, I just think you just got to keep grabbing opportunities when they come along, and just keep making what you can of what you've got around you.
Yeah, you've most certainly done that. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. So tell me, how did you get to go to the Times? Did they invite you? Did you sort of go to them, or was it just one of those situations that arose?
Well, I think what to be the food editor.
Mm,
Um,
mm.
I mean, I have to say first and foremost, I didn't invent the dish by any means. That was already a very, oh, have I disappeared? No, that was a successful title already. So I knew it and loved it. And in fact, when I was at Leeds, Laurel Ives, who was brilliantly editing the section, said, would I like to write a column about what it's like to transfer from newspaper editor to trainee chef? So I was already writing for the section. And then Laurel left, and Eleanor, who was editing the magazine, said, look, actually, we do need a food editor, and, would you like to come and do that? And I was already working with Code, which I love Incredibly because it's really, if people who don't know it, it's an app
Explain.
and a website and a magazine and a weekly bulletin for people who work in anything to do with hospitality, bars, restaurants, private chefs, sommeliers, anyone, hotel people. And so I love this world so much, and code was a way to immerse myself in it. And having been a restaurant critic for a long time, I'd come across code sort of from the outside. And Adam
Yeah.
Hyman, who invented code and who's a brilliant entrepreneur, said, look, code needs a bit of a voice. And so would I come along and help with that? So I was enjoying that very much. And then Eleanor came along. I mean, this sounds like, you know, I've got things falling at my feet. It's not like that at all. I think just when you've been around a long time, you sort of get to know a lot of people. And so Eleanor said, we need someone to actually look after the food pages. So I said, well, maybe I could do both, because I suppose having worked for a newspaper that closed down, I was a little bit, I suppose, wanting to hedge my bets and not put everything into one project. So I thought, well, maybe I could figure this out and do them both during the week. As it turns out, the 3-day-a-week job is really a 4-day-a-week job, and the 2-day-a-week job is really a 3-day-a-week job. So like a lot of people, I'm sure, who might be watching, or who you know, and you yourself, that, you know, the jobs sort of expand to fill the time, and sometimes expand beyond the time available. And
yeah, and it can be challenging because things aren't working out, so you need to run faster, gather more, and deliver.
Yeah, and I think something that a lot of people are going through right now is, you know, whether or not they've ever worked from home, but perhaps if they are working outside an office environment, you find that it's really hard to say at 6 o'clock, right, close the laptop, you know, go off and relax, because, you know, it's hard to do that when you're at home. When you're at work, there's a certain rhythm and sort of rituals, and people do leave. But at home, it's much harder. So that's something that I think is really difficult if you're self-employed, or you're sort of working for two different people. It all just sort of bleeds in.
I think people think it's incredibly lucky to work at home. And it is on one hand, but it's also not, because you have to be very strict and regulated, and you almost need to go to another room. Otherwise, you are still wandering around in your pajamas, and you could be writing something sitting in bed. And that's not healthy for you long term.
That makes me feel like you've got a camera in my house.
No, I haven't.
That does happen quite a lot.
Yeah, no, it can, but you know that other days you have appointments to go out to, or you go into work. So it's not 5 days a week, which people are supposedly struggling with at the moment. But just tell me, so you also, with the Sunday Times, you've created the cookbook club, haven't you?
That's right. That was really an opportunity. And I have to give kudos to Hannah Evans, who works with me. She's the young, brilliant sort of digital editor of the magazine, and of course understands all stuff where I'm a sort of old Luddite. And we really, I mean, you know, if you look behind me, you'll see I'm a obsessive cookbook fan. I'm sure we'll probably talk about that at some point. I've angled it so that you can see the problem and the solution. But Hannah and I got talking about how can we engage the readers. You know, it's, you know, journalism these days is a bit less of a sort of megaphone and a bit more of a you know, two-way channel, and we really wanted to do something that involved the readers and kept them coming to us and talking to us, and us talking back with them. And what we didn't, so we set up this cookbook club where every month we choose a book. I choose a book that I think people will enjoy cooking from, and we sort of launch it, and there's a competition, and there's a Facebook group. It's called Sunday Times Cookbook Club, and people post pictures of what they've cooked. Initially we thought, well, you know, let's see how it goes. A few people will enter the competition because we have some nice prizes. And what we didn't realise, but of course what is so brilliant about people who love cooking, is they've formed this incredible community. So they talk to each other all the time. And, you know, they sort of give each other tips and hints, and they don't just cook from the book. They say, oh, this is my grandma's recipe for, you know, scones or whatever. And it's taken on a life of its own. I mean, it's really grown exponentially during the lockdown, because I think people are enjoying having people to talk to about their food, you know, where they can't necessarily have a dinner party or have friends around. You know, they can do it through the medium of, you know, old familiar Facebook.
And also people have got time, and they're reconnecting with proper cooking. You know, they really have the time, and because of all the health issues, they want to nourish their family or their friends, and that's within their household, obviously. And so they're just sort of cherishing those books and getting things out and challenging themselves, like the sourdough baking that's going on around the UK.
Yeah, I'm a sourdough refusenik, I'm afraid, although I have been making bread every sort of 3 or 4 days, but using the kind of putting it in a Le Creuset, you know, and cooking it in the oven, just a normal dough recipe, and it's amazing. So I'm a convert. But
Yeast or dried yeast?
fresh yeast, because I'm so lucky. I live in London, and one of those all-night shops, that a Middle Eastern shop that's making flatbreads and amazing breads all the time. The lady at the back, if you're in the know, she'll sell you fresh yeast. So I've got a dealer for fresh yeast.
I live not too far from the head quarters of the factory where they make all the Paul bread, and
Oh, wow.
you can go there and you can get flour and fresh yeast, and it's on a building. It's on a modern estate, business park, and it's great. And so that's my dealer as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have had problems getting flour, and it's a terrible shame. I was hearing that Shipton Mill, one of those brilliant places, that's an old heritage mill, doing very well. I bought flour for them many times. Actually weren't, of course they weren't ready. Who could have predicted that everybody would be demanding flour? And I think it's been really hard for those small operators to pivot to supplying on huge volume. And I feel for them, because of course they don't want to let people down, but there's only a certain number of mills they've got, I presume.
Well, a friend's been helping there, and they went from 100 orders a week to 10,000.
Oh my gosh.
And
yeah.
they are a proper cottage industry, doing something that's artisan. But I think they're rising to the challenge, and they're getting there.
Yeah, well, that's great. Yeah, that's great. And I think, quite a few restaurants, certainly in London, I don't know if other people have got their own stories, but in London, lots of restaurants who would normally be doing their own baking are doing that. But they've also, of course, got channels where they get industrial quantities of flour in, and they're selling direct to us. There's a place near me in northwest London called Parlour, which is selling flour and selling fresh yeast and selling starters and things for people to do it themselves. And that's brilliant, because of course they're already got the supply channel.
Yeah. And we've got a pub around the corner from us, and not only are they selling all those things, they're also selling plants now and flowers. Wow. Which is quite funny.
Yeah.
But maybe but also, tell me, you've had lots of traveling that comes with your job, and we all want to have a little sense of a holiday at the moment. Now, I know you went to Japan with the Wagyu, but it's actually the Kobe beef. Can you tell us a little bit about that? It sounded fantastic.
I mean, I was incredibly lucky. I don't travel that much, I have to say. Probably once or maybe twice a year I allow myself to go off, because most of the time it's a bit like being a travel editor. Everyone thinks it's the best job in the world. You're actually the person at the desk sending everyone else somewhere. So I thought, well, this is one I really want to do. I've never been to Japan, and I'm fascinated by the idea of Wagyu beef. I don't know very much about it. So we were taken around to this incredible historic prefecture in Japan, where Kobe beef, which is the sort of highest of the high, Wagyu just means Japanese beef. Kobe is a sort of brand name of a particular breed of cattle, particular way of raising them, slaughtering them, and we saw everything from the farms with the calves right through to the slaughterhouse, the auction house, and it being cooked. And so it was a really interesting insight into something not many Western people see, which is the sort of love and respect that if you're a meat eater, that where that meat comes from is not, I mean, it's very expensive. And I think a lot of people think, oh yeah, Wagyu beef, it's one of those things you see in a sort of, Richard Caring private club or something like that, and it's vastly expensive. Well, it is expensive, but there's a reason for that. And that's because of the way that the cattle is produced, and the very small volumes that there are. There's only a certain number of cattle that are graded that highly. So it was an enormous privilege to see it. But my goodness, Japan, we were on a mission, and I went with the fantastic commentator and sort of social media superstar Clerkenwell boy, and he has so much energy, and I was just running to keep up the entire time, and also wanted to eat all the food. So we were having sort of, I think we were averaging 5 or 6 meals a day, because I didn't want to miss anything at all. So
you go all that way, you have to eat what's put in front of you and what the chefs offer you. I do not take it for granted at all. It's an incredible privilege. I'm so lucky to do those sorts of trips and to be invited along, and I really relish every moment of it. I know that it's it probably looks from the outside glamorous, and it can be glamorous, and that's one of those times when it is glamorous, but I absolutely love it, and don't take it for granted by any means. Well, no, and it's also still work, because I'm sure sometimes you miss birthdays for your daughter or whatever and things like that. And, there's only so much one can eat. but
Yeah.
you have to.
Yes. I mean, yes, that is true. It was very funny when I worked at the Independent on Sunday, when I was editing the paper, I was also the restaurant critic. I'd been the restaurant critic for quite a few years, about 7 or 8 years. And when it was announced that the newspaper was going, folding and no longer going to be in existence, my husband's sort of second reaction after the first reaction, which was, "Oh no, I'm really sorry you're losing your job," was, "Does that mean we're not going to go to fancy restaurants anymore?" Because he's so used to being the +1, on the restaurant reviews. So I had to break it to him. Yeah, sorry, John, it's all over.
Oh, just tell me, I know you're great friends with Marina O'Logan, and none of us know who she is, but you know who she is. Now, some people must know who she is.
Well, she is extremely diligent about maintaining her anonymity. Very few people, even at the Sunday Times, I mean, very few, I would say probably 2 or 3 people perhaps know what she looks like and who she is, even there. And I got to know her really because back in the day when she was reviewing restaurants for Metro and I was at the Indie, we had just struck up a friendship on Twitter in the days when Twitter wasn't just a kind of maelstrom of bile. And we got chatting. And because we were in the same side of the industry, we were both reviewing. She said, "Oh, well, let's meet up." And we became friends. So it's just such a privilege to be her editor, and I enjoy her work so much. But I also, we do get to go out occasionally. We both had our birthdays recently, so we've got quite a sort of backlog of martinis to get through when we see each other. But she takes her job so seriously, and I think the anonymity thing, she does get a lot of pushback on that, and people saying, "Oh, but can it really be the case? Or why do you do that? Isn't it important that people know who you are?" Well, it's really not, because she has the same experiences as you do, as anyone watching does, as the general public. And if you're going to critique something, that's the best way to do it.
I think it's absolutely brilliant, I have to say, because she's been given no favours and doesn't expect any favours. And did she invent the concept, or did someone suggest it to her?
Oh, well, how do you know? I'm not sure that I don't know the answer to that. We'll ask her.
Okay.
Maybe she'll tell us.
She's just joined us. Marina, can you tell us? Yes.
I suspect it probably was her idea. I think she's she's worked in restaurants, of course. Back when she was much younger, she has worked at front of house. So I imagine she knew that the best way to do it. And also, I remember years ago going to a new restaurant. It was a Mark Hicks restaurant, and Adrian Gill, A.A. Gill, of course, famous late Sunday Times critic, came in about half an hour after me, and I'd been given the sort of rubbish table next to the lavatory and with a good view of the dishwasher in the kitchen, and they were all over him. They were all over him, and I thought, well, this just shows. Nothing against him, because actually that is sort of part of the brilliance of his writing, but it just shows the difference of experience that you get. And I know Marina's gone into restaurants and asked for a table, and they've said, "Oh," and they've shown her the rubbish table, and she said, "Oh, could I please have, that one over there?" In an empty restaurant, could I sit in the nice seat by the window or whatever? And they said, "Oh no, we're saving that one for press." And
that is hysterical.
if you only knew, anyway.
You must have some brilliant conversations, but I think it's fantastic. And I think also she's reviewing it for the people on the street and not for the press.
Yeah,
and
exactly right.
They're the people who fill the seats.
Yeah, exactly right. And also, of course, what she does so brilliantly is sometimes she goes to a restaurant which very, very small percentage of people will ever go to. But it's still, it's still an enjoyable experience. We can sort of enjoy it vicariously through her, good or bad. It's just such a pleasure. And she's been very clever with this switch to reviewing or cooking along with chefs. It's such a clever idea.
It is. And just tell me about that, because your whole magazine, you've had to sort of reinvent yourself, because usually you're on photo shoots, you're going into restaurants, you're working with very well-known chefs, and now you're doing everything via the internet.
Yeah.
So who's doing the photography? They're doing it themselves, or it's coming from their books?
Well, I suppose being a sort of old news hound, many, many years working on newspapers, I'm not going to say that I knew anything for anyone else, but I sort of thought, listen, we need to really quickly get some things done, because if we get to the point where we can't do any more shoots, then it's going to be a struggle, because it's 7 pages every single week, and once a month it's 20 pages, and that's a lot to fill. So we sort of scrambled quite quickly, and some brilliant chefs like Sean Searley from the Quality Chop House and Karen Gokani from Hoppers said, well, we'll just do a shoot. We won't don't have a food stylist, just come to the restaurant and we'll cook it here and just have a photographer. So we did some things like that super quickly. And we had some sort of stuff in the bag, if you like. But I don't know if anyone will have seen last Sunday's dish, which is our sort of big week. So we did a thing about tinned fish. So that
yes, I loved it.
So that was I ordered some tinned fish on the internet and sent it to the photographer. So he did the picture for the cover, and then we had Karen's fantastic Sri Lankan food we'd already photographed, and then I just got interested, like a lot of sort of food junkies, of watching professional chefs on their Instagrams cooking at home, and thought, well, this is a fun opportunity to have my nose around in their kitchens and see what they're cooking at home, because I'll bet you they're not plating it, beautifully in a sort of off to one side of a sort of amazing, very heavy sort of raw ceramic plate. I bet they're putting big plates of pasta on and eating it like the rest of us in front of normal people or whatever they're watching on telly. So I really wanted to get a sort of sense of that and connect them with the readers. And 4 chefs stepped up brilliantly, and they all have children and cooked with the children and gave us fantastic pictures. So
I loved that feature. It was really, really good and very clever. And I think there's one good thing that's come out of this is food is being more normalized for people, and it's being appreciated at home, and it doesn't have to be all on the perfect plate at the perfectly angle, and it's much more achievable.
Yes, I think achievable is something that really has to be, that's always my watchword, because the comments that you get underneath, any recipe feature will inevitably say things like, oh, how do you expect me to, find smoked mozzarella or whatever? And you think, oh gosh, okay, well, sorry, and sometimes people say, I counted and there are 11 ingredients in this recipe. And it's like, well, 2 of them are salt and pepper. It's like, it can be a little bit frustrating. But on the whole, I'm quite careful to make things accessible. And I think in pertaining to the situation we're in now, I think what's been really interesting is that I'll say to Tom Kerridge, or I'll say to Rosie Burkitt or Sky McAlpine, all of whom write for me, if people can't get that, then what can they use instead? Because people need to know that if you haven't got wild garlic, what can you use instead? Or if you can't get fresh fish, the things that people are struggling to get, give us some alternatives. And I think that has been one of the best things, is sort of adaptability for everyone.
I think that's really good, and that's what's come through on all the talks we've had to chefs. You change things, use your common sense. If you haven't got potatoes, use sweet potato or whatever else. And don't be so scared about your flowers, people have been saying, because it will still be edible. It might not be perfect. I'm just going to say that Marina just said that she invented the idea of being invisible, but we've just had a chef say that, sorry, am I really crackly?
No, I can hear you. Fine.
Oh, you can. Okay. A chef has just turned around and said, but it's also given a chance for people to have time and try and achieve more.
That's also true. Yeah, and I would not want to make everything very, very basic. Here's how to do, a grilled cheese sandwich, although that is delicious. I absolutely agree with that, and I would never. I always try to have that balance between things that are sort of quick. Delicious pasta supper, right up to baking something or filleting a fish, or trying something that's going to push you a little bit. I suppose from my own experience as a someone who's always loved food, and I was lucky enough to go through professional training, and it does make you more confident. But I think on a smaller level, giving people that bit of encouragement, that pushing them a little bit, is absolutely right, because with that confidence, of course, comes so much pleasure. If you think, well, I'm not scared of jointing a chicken, or I am going to have a go at making that panna cotta or whatever. I think that's really exciting for people, because you do feel great when you achieve it.
Yeah, and also there's 7 days a week, so cook normally for 5 and have fun for 2 and challenge yourself.
Yeah, although it's quite funny, all this sort of free time that people keep talking about that they've got, and I'm like. I am cooking more, definitely, because as we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation, working from home does mean that I can get up at 6 and make some bread, or put the bread in the oven, and then sort of get my work done in slightly different increments. And I think for a lot of people, that's what they can do, because not everyone's got free time. Not everyone's, you know, sort of, I think probably very few people actually are sort of thinking, gosh, I'm going to read that improving book, or, you know, I'm going to sort of, you know, build myself a compost corner. You know, I haven't come across many of those people.
No. And tell me, your time at Leeds, because they take about 90 students a year, I think. And you do have lots of mature students who go back because they're having a rethink of their career, or they've just got time and have always wanted to do it. So how was it for you being in a room with like 19-year-olds and 40-year-olds?
Yes, I was one of the most mature of the mature students, that's for sure. I wasn't quite the oldest, but I was definitely up there. I think Leeds has this reputation for being, you know, somewhere that either parents would send their kids who, you know, didn't know what, you know, middle class parents who didn't know what their kids were ever going to do, or women who sort of wanted to learn how to cook for their banker husbands. I think it's still got that sort of mentality for people. Actually, that's not the case at all. And although there are still some young people but they're passionate about cooking. And we all know that, you know, hospitality actually is a brilliant, I mean, not right now, but in general is a brilliant industry to get into, because it's exciting, and the camaraderie and all those reasons why we love it. So there's a lot of young people wanting to, seeking that world. But there are some career changes, and it's not just about learning how to be a chef. Yes, obviously that is the absolute cornerstone of it. But one of my classmates, and he's remained a great friend, Tim, wanted to open a restaurant. He was sort of in the second part of his professional career, and had got some money and knew that he wanted to open a restaurant, as you know, to own it, be the patron of it, not the chef. But he wanted to understand everything about it. So he wanted to understand the techniques, the time involved with making certain kinds of food, and the real sort of backstory, if you like, to what it's like in a restaurant. And I thought that was incredibly brave. And also he did happen to be irritatingly an amazing cook. We plucked pheasant together, and I think once you've done that, you know, you're friends for life.
Yeah, but it is an amazing course, and it's incredibly intense, because I remember I used to go in and help there sometimes, and I used to love talking to the mature students who, like possibly Tim, I can't remember, there was someone there who I was talking to, he was a banker, and he had an idea that he wanted to open a restaurant, but he decided he wanted to know from the bottom upwards how to do it. And he was really interesting. I don't know what he went on to open, but you know, I take my hat off to people like that, who are prepared to do the washing up, do the chopping, and do the hard work, instead of just go, I'll earn this.
Yeah, I mean, and that's exactly what you do. You know, you do all your own washing up, you do all of your own prep, you do all of your own clean down. It's super important that you learn like that. And for someone, you know, for me, I found that quite difficult, because I'm not going to lie, you know, I'd come fairly hot on the heels of editing a newspaper, and the Independent's are quite a small operation, but nevertheless, you know, you sort of, you know, you
had your standards.
Let's get stuff done, guys, you know. And so of course I went into day one with my Birkenstock clogs on, and my, you know, brand new sort of weird mob cap that they make you wear and everything, and I was, you know, student sort of 47, and no one cared anything about any of that. And I was very quickly sort of, you know, sort of, yeah, told in no uncertain terms that shut up, get on with it, listen, you know, you don't know better than me how to do anything, everyone here is in the same place. And that, it's a bit like one of those sort of Hollywood movies, you know, they kind of break you down to build you back up, and I needed that, I think. It's been an amazing life lesson as well as a professional skill.
They put out some amazing chefs though, don't they?
Yeah, they do, and some brilliant authors. I mean, one of my classmates, Lara Lee, has got a book coming out next week called Coconut and Sambal, and she is one of the most, you know, tenacious people that I've ever met, and she, you know, got every single experience out of that year at Leeds, and you know, that pays off. You know, you get out of it what you put into it, and I absolutely loved it. And now, you know, if I'm asked to do a charity dinner, or, you know, in some way cook, because I do still do that occasionally, you know, I'm not daunted, because I put in the time.
You can do it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I probably would slightly sort of be terrified at being given a whole turbot to fill it, as Marina did the other day.
You'd manage it, I'm sure you would.
Coming out this Sunday, but I was like, oh, it's fine, you know, and then thought, actually, would I still be able to do that? You know, it's but it's brilliant
at
stuff.
home you could.
Yeah.
It's all in the knife.
It's all about the knife.
Yeah, yeah. And just tell me about your role at Code at the moment, because what's happening in Code, because the hospitality industry.
Yeah, it's a really difficult time because Code is built on the community of
Mm,
hospitality, and it really started out as a way for people who work in hospitality to visit each other's restaurants and be able to experience that. It was actually a very old-fashioned idea, so that they could see what everyone else is doing, and it is a sort of a community built on relationships. But of course, when the restaurant's closed, that's no longer viable. And so it really, I guess, a lot of it is in hibernation. Although
mm,
what Code is really trying to do, and of course I can do that because I'm the sort of voice, is keep some level of communication going. There are learning in lockdown opportunities. We're trying to do webinars. We've got the Monday morning bulletin, which I hope gives people a feeling of connection, because I think hospitality, because it's very rigorous and because it's about the brigade, and about sort of the odd times you're not working at the same time as everyone else, and suddenly when you're not doing that anymore, it can be a little bit lonely,
mm.
particularly perhaps for some of the younger people in hospitality. So I hope that the bulletin and the sort of continued voice is something that will keep people going. I mean, and I do believe it, we will come back. It will be really hard. I think everybody is following the news, and it seems to be changing all the time about when we're going to be able to go back to restaurants, what restaurants are going to be like. Is it going to be perspex shields in between the diners? Is it going to be takeaway only? It's all sort of up for discussion. But nevertheless, it's a it's an industry full of very tenacious people, because food is love and people want to feed other people. That's why people run restaurants.
Yeah.
And, the love hasn't gone away.
I was talking to a friend in Spain this morning, and she was saying that next week, all the restaurants with terraces will open. And
Oh,
then they're talking about the week after that, the restaurants will open with so much space in between them. So, a restaurant that's meant to take 50 people will only take 25. So it seems that they're moving forward. But then we were saying, is it because also that Spain is, well, they need their money. They need to kickstart their economy because, well, everyone's suffering at the moment, aren't
yeah.
they?
I think, well, that's exactly the same here. And most people who who run restaurants, you don't see very many chefs, perhaps Gordon Ramsay and a couple of others driving around in Ferraris, but most of them are driving around in a sort of second-hand VW, because not very many people get rich running restaurants, and they're doing it because they love it and they're passionate. And if they do reopen, but with 25 tables instead of 50, that's going to be difficult because the margins are tiny. And a friend of mine, Gary Asher, who's got restaurants up in Manchester and Prescott, went into one of his restaurants and took half of the tables out to see what it would be like. And, it's not very viable for a lot of people, because,
No.
you still got to have the staff. You still need people. If you're open and you're making the menu, you've got to have the chefs and you've got to have the front of house staff. So it's
You
a tough
can't
one.
half your staff because you half your customers.
No,
There's no
but,
way.
I
You can
don't.
lose a few.
Yeah, I don't want to sort of be the sort of doomsday person on restaurants, because I do believe that, that we will come back from it, and that people like me who love going to restaurants, and I hope
Mm.
lots of people who are watching, we are raring to go and spend our money back in restaurants, and however we can do that, I think we will.
Exactly. And I hope also I love that so many of them now have set up as shops and takeaways and delivering great food. That's ingenious that they're managing to keep their identity alive and ticking over,
Yeah.
which is fabulous.
Yeah, and I said that to Jackson Boxer, who runs a restaurant in West London, and he was saying it's actually really tough to do that, because you've still got to, again, it's still a lot of work for not really much of a profit. But I said, well, the most important thing is that you're staying visible, and that people are, thinking about you, and you're on their radar, but also you're continuing to sort of do that act of giving them a good time. I always say, when I was running newspapers, I was giving people bad news, and then when you cook for people, you're giving them good times. And
Yeah.
I said, if you're giving people good times, they remember that. I think we'll all remember after this, the place that did have, plants that they were selling from the front of their restaurant, or the delivery that they were doing, or places that are cooking for those in need. I mean, even today,
That's amazing.
well, Izzy Crocker, who's an amazing photographer who I actually went to Palestine with, just pulled together this cookbook to raise money for chefs in schools, and they're cooking food for kids who are in very vulnerable situations. So she's done this very quick turnaround cookbook to raise money for kids who need to be fed. and the need is much worse, obviously, in lockdown. And she's just sort of turned that around, and those sorts of things you just think, wow, that's super inspiring. And, you know, there's always going to
The
be creative
ingenuity
people.
of people is great, and the way they're sort of moving forward. Can I just ask you about one more of your trips? Because we've done the beef. I followed you on your trip to India with mangoes, and it looked beautiful. It was a ray of sunshine.
It was the most wonderful experience. I mean, I love India so much, and I've been lucky enough to go quite a few times on holiday. And Romy Gill, who's a brilliant chef and raconteur and enthusiast and great champion of women in kitchens, she and I had sort of talked about this idea, and I was like, let's just do it. I'm commissioning myself. I can do that once a year.
I'm in charge.
I'm in charge. I'm going to send myself to India, and again, it was actually quite brutal, because it was sort of 40-degree heat, and we were, you know, sort of hacking around the whole country, really, because of course India is, you know, 70 countries in one. You know, it's so nuanced, each different area, and mangoes are, you know, something that is so important in India, and there's such pride in the different kinds and the different varieties. And, you know, they literally laugh at you if you say, you know, if you and I, or maybe people watching, would sort of think, oh yes, I know about mangoes, Alfonso mangoes. In India, they're like, you know, that's so boring, that's so like vanilla, you know, think of something more interesting. There's so many different varieties, and we absolutely, I mean, I have to say, I didn't look at a mango for quite a long time after I came back, because we ate a lot. I did bring some back in my suitcase, but I learned such a lot. I learned such a lot about the way that the fruit is used in so many different kinds of cooking. Everything from, we went to an amazing tasting restaurant in the sort of kind of cool new part of Mumbai, and they did a sort of mango tasting menu for us, right to the sort of lovely farms where they're, you know, we're just sort of making incredible mango chutneys and things for everyone to have for the workers' lunch. You know, I mean, it really was spectacular. I was super lucky to do that trip.
It's an amazing fruit, I do think, and we don't understand it well enough over here because
Yeah.
we don't have the variety. We have two varieties, and that's it.
That's right. And also, you know, like a lot of produce, it comes here, perhaps it's sort of freighted in and it's picked unripe, and, you know, you get it, it's a bit like avocados, you know, it's sort of like hard, ripe, off. You know,
Dead.
you have to get it at the right moment, and it's tough. But there are, you know, like a lot of produce, you know, you can find people who export direct, and you can. There's a brilliant company. I don't know if they do to the UK, but you can sort of be a subscriber, and they send you a box of mangoes, each different varieties that comes into the sort of ripe condition, and they are just incredible. You know.
Wow. That's one thing that's very interesting that's happened during this period is I know we all go to the supermarkets and people support them, but the suppliers to restaurants have invented themselves to supply straight to our homes. So the quality of some of the food that people are getting at home and the challenges that they're having to cook with different things is wonderful, I think.
Well, I'm very, very lucky because I live in London, and you know, I haven't been to, I probably, apart from perhaps to buy milk, I don't think I've been to a supermarket throughout this entire lockdown, because I'm lucky that I'm on the radar of Farm Drop, which, you know, they sort of aggregate lots of different producers, not just fruit and vegetables, but meat, fish, dairy, all kinds of stuff. And you go onto their website and order it, and a box comes with all the things you need. And that's just brilliant, you know. So I've been incredibly lucky to, and, you know, I'm in a lucky position that I can afford to do that. I can buy good produce. I try to waste nothing at all. I get everything out of it. I've got, just earlier before we joined this call, I've got some beetroot that was just sort of looking a little bit sad, roasting in the oven, and I just made some wild garlic gnocchi with some wild garlic that was looking a bit sort of flabby and off, and some potatoes that, you know, I've made into the gnocchi. So I try not to waste anything, but in fact, it makes you realize, I hope, for a lot of people, that what we get in the supermarket is quite limited. And if you're lucky enough to be able to access those companies that are like Natura or Farm Drop or Pale Green Dot, you know, there's loads of them.
There's loads
you
of
realize that actually, you know, the prices are not exorbitant. And if you're getting things that are just in season, that's when, you know, they're in great condition, but B, that's when they're most economical, because, you know, you're not buying things that are being flown in from somewhere else.
And they last a lot longer because they're so much fresher and they're more local. Yeah. Someone's just said, right, we live in Mumbai. Our neighbourhood is local, has local grocers where we buy things, and the vegetable cart guy comes to our lane every day. We don't get fish or red meat, not just chicken and eggs. Well, there we go. Someone having
Like
deliveries in India.
Well, I wish I lived somewhere where a man with a cart would come to northwest London every day and bring fresh vegetables and eggs and things. That would be amazing.
That would
I mean,
be
it's an
really
incredible
good.
food culture. It's, you know, it's very different.
Yeah.
It's like parts. It's of course like parts of Europe where people. It's, you know, it's the ritual to go and buy things, you know, when they're absolutely in season, and you just buy fresh every day.
Yeah,
But
you
maybe
just don't
that's,
waste anything at all. You know,
no,
like your leaves that were sprouting off your beetroots, you can stir fry
yeah,
those
yeah,
instead of just
exactly,
putting them in your compost or your bin. Just
yeah,
eat everything.
yeah.
Keep
And
peelings and make stocks and soups.
yeah, and the bottom bits of the asparagus, you know, I kind of cook those in a little bit of stock and puree them, and then when I make a risotto, you know, you can just stir that through at the end, and that
Yeah.
just gives it the lovely asparagus flavour. And you know, you sort of use all those bits that otherwise would be a bit woody. You know, I feel like I've sort of gone slightly 1950s. I'm sort of
I think
a
it's
bit.
turning us all into more thoughtful cooks.
I hope so. I do hope so. I think those sort of days of, you know, stuffing your sort of weekly Ocado into the fridge and then bringing it all back out 5 days later and chucking a certain percentage of it away. I hope that this has been, you know, a time for people to realise that that's, you know, we can do it differently,
Yeah.
perhaps.
Lisa, this has been absolutely fantastic. I'm a big admirer of yours. I love getting
Very
my
kind.
Sunday Times and reading the food pages.
Oh, I'm so pleased.
Yeah, I've always liked it. But can I ask you, what is your favourite related food, film, podcast, TV, book, magazine? I don't mind.
Gosh. Well, I would say food food film. I mean, Big Night, the amazing Italian themed Stanley Tucci film where these brothers are running a restaurant. Actually, it's very sort of appetite to now, and of course they're failing and it's a disaster, and they're desperately trying to sort of get a celebrity client to come and eat in their restaurant, and then they think everything will be fine. If anyone hasn't watched it, I feel like a lot of people have. Please watch it; it's amazing. And also,
Okay, that's a good.
I recently binged on all the Anthony Bourdain Parts Unknown. It was on
Oh,
Netflix. I think it's now on Amazon. I think you can find it on Amazon Prime. And it's, you know, the brilliant sort of gonzo chef turned journalist going to all these parts of the world and eating everything. And, you know, while we're all sitting in our armchairs, it's just such a fantastic escape. And he just does it so brilliantly, and he's completely fearless. And that's just a great thing to watch. In terms of books,
you don't
I
have to
mean,
go on, but you can. You've got all your books behind you.
well, one thing I do want to mention, and it might look, you know, lovely, and it is fantastic, but my husband, who's a builder, said about 3 months ago, right, that's it, there's no more shelves. It's now one in, one out. So for a book to stay on, to come into the house, because I do, you know, I'm lucky I get sent books, for it to stay, it's got to be, you know, it's got to really cut the mustard, no pun intended. So, you know, I only really keep books that I know I'm really going to use a lot. And I mean, the gnocchi that I'm making tonight is from Rosie Burkett's book, The Joyful Home Cook, which is
Oh, I
really,
love her book.
yeah, and it's a brilliant book for now. And then the other one, which I've used a lot recently, is this one, Nothing Fancy. She's an American author called Alison Roman. And it's just about when you've got people coming round and you just want to sort of, you know, sort of put something together. And there's a lot of recipes in there that are just super fun. And, you know, she does have passions, like she really loves anchovies. So if you don't love anchovies, then, you know, but I mean, there's far too many. There's so many to mention. Simon Hopkinson's my food hero. He was the first person who really got me interested because I sort of inherited being his editor. From Alan Jenkins. Alan Jenkins was his sort of editor, and then he left and I took it over. And so if I'm ever in doubt as to what to cook, I just turn immediately to Simon Hopkinson. And you cannot go wrong. Yeah.
And tell me, when you have people round to your house for supper, do you feel under pressure, or do you go, no, this is my house, I'm doing it my way, and I'm quite relaxed?
Uh, well, certainly. Well, of course, the most important thing that happens is no one ever invites you to their house because they're like, "Oh my god!" But you know, you're a professional, and we're too scared. And it's like, you don't understand. I'd be so happy to just have a baked potato with beans and cheese. It's just not to have to cook myself, you know. But people get nervous, and but when people come to me, I've learned the hard way mainly through cutting the top off my thumb a couple of times when I was sort of nervous and slightly drunk and sort of, you know, doing all this and thinking I was really, you know, fabulous. And yeah, don't do that at home. So I try to stick to things that I know that I can do, and that people generally enjoy something, you know, like coq au vin, or you know, just a really tasty pasta dish that allows you to spend time with people. You know, I think the sort of formal, I better do all of the, you know, all of the high maintenance starters and main course and pudding. I think, you know, yeah, it's crazy. Actually, everybody, you know, if you just whip out an amazing bar of chocolate or beautiful one incredible cheese at the end, happy days, you know.
Yeah, people come round to see you, not to sort of judge you.
Yeah, and actually, I got rid of the table in my kitchen because there's a sofa. I don't know if people can see it, but there's a chair there now where it used to be a
Oh
dining
yeah.
table in the kitchen, because I sort of actually want to, when I'm in my kitchen, just do my cooking, and then I want to sort of step out of that room and go and sit in we've got a sort of knock through living and dining room together, and it's quite nice, that sort of whole thing of having, I don't really like people watching.
Have
I
you
get
done any
performance
live
anxiety.
streams? Have you done
So
any live cooking with anyone for the magazine?
Well, I've been asked a few times. I haven't really done it.
Okay.
I've got a horrible feeling it's coming. But you know,
Will
when
you please share? Please share. We will be
well,
your
maybe
watchers.
if this goes on much longer, you know, I mean, you know, famous last words, I'll probably be like, "Hey guys, cook along with me." But at the moment, I'm not into it. You know, when you work with people, you know, like Sky McAlpine, who can just make everything just look absolutely a breeze. You know,
She is so magically gifted. All the girls who work for you are. I love them all. Sky and Rosie and Tom Kerridge, who you bought. He's great fun.
We love Tom. In fact, I'm doing a live thing with him next week, and he, you know, but also he's just sort of, you know, he's like the rest of us. You know, if you look at his Instagram, every now and then he's like, he said yesterday, I fancy making shepherd's pie, but I couldn't be bothered with the mash. I was like, Tom, really? So he just had like the mince and then the sort of peas. I was like, wow, that's, yeah. Okay.
I like his honesty. I like it.
Why not? You know, why not?
Yeah, exactly. We all know he can cook. But this has been fantastic. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
We will all continue to read the magazine and keep watching what's happening. Holds knife like pen. Did you get a book deal? I didn't finish that one. Did you get a book deal?
I did get a book deal, and then I didn't finish the book. So my agent. So my agent, in fact, I bumped into her recently, and I was like almost too embarrassed to see her, and she came over and said, "I haven't forgotten about you, and just, you know, just carry on." So yeah, it'll be, you know, whole Zimmer frame like pen by the time I finish. But
you've got time. You've got time.
Exactly.
But thank you very, very much. You are a blast of energy. There's no doubt about that.
Thank you.
It's been fantastic. Thank you very much indeed.
It's a
and
pleasure.
Tomorrow, we are joined by the amazing October 26 Bakery, who I believe makes the best bread in London.
Absolutely.
Ramukla, I love it. And when she very first opened, the Oxford Symposium of Fine Food ordered her bread because a chef said this is the best bread, and it is delicious, and we're all really missing her. So if you want to have a sourdough lesson tomorrow, you can meet Rukla, and her 7-year-old daughter might be in the background. She's warned me, so it could be fun.
Well,
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.